Hello everyone. Today I was asked by a few parents and a few students on how to revise for your junior cert that's coming up, and perhaps other exams if you're watching it later on. So especially on how to revise when you have so many different subjects, and maybe to that are kind of ready in different to different extent, and maybe some subjects that you find more interesting than others and more easy to prepare and to revise than others, as well as kind of how you manage your time. Maybe say if I had all the time in the world, it would be ready. But if we only have 2 or 3 months left, or indeed shorter, then how can we revise in the most efficient way possible? So I'm going to keep this as short as I can, and it's going to be broadly broken down into 3 parts. So, number one, planning, overall planning on kind of having a perspective of how much time you've got left, and number two, practical things on how you can revise based on my personal experience, and also number three, daily planning. So once you have the overview, um, and then kind of the amount of time you have left, and then now we kind of focus on specifically every day how we can kind of structure our day when you're on holidays or on the weekends, um, so that you can study kind of as best as we can, and as well as leaving a little bit of downtime for ourselves. Okay, so the first thing, planning. So what I recommend you do, you can always just have pen and paper with you as you go through this video. One thing before I start, this is entirely based on my experience, both going through the junior cert and leaving cert myself, as well as coaching different students through IB, through A levels, through junior cert and leaving cert as well, across different subjects. But of course, my views are going to be subjective, and they will not apply in every single scenario, to every single subject, to every single person. So I just hope that you can take whatever is helpful for you in this video, as needed for your own experience and preferences. Okay, so number one, planning. First thing you do is grab an A4 sheet and basically write down the kind of in rows the number of weeks you've got left. So say I'm recording this in April, and the junior cert is, let's say, kind of mid or early June, then you've got roughly 7 or 8 weeks left, and then you have a visual way of seeing just on a single A4, right? No more than one single A4, because then your brain has to kind of switch between the two. It doesn't really know how much time you've got left. One single A4, number of weeks you've got left. Write down maybe 8 rows or 7 rows, depending on the number of weeks. And then mark the last day. That's when my exams start. And then go backwards from there. So for example, maybe 3 days before that, I want to have finished all my past papers, or maybe a week before that, I want to have finished all my past papers, and then mark that. So you have your final deadline, and then you have your own self deadline for different stages. So you go backwards. I want to have all my past papers completed, or I want to have finished, and then the week before that or 2 weeks before that, I want to have finished revising all the chapters, right? And then I start kind of doing more papers, or going through previous topics or whatever. And so you go backwards to set yourself deadlines going from your last day, leaving always 1 or 2 days extra, more than you think, because other subjects might get in the way, or maybe touch wood, you feel a little bit unwell or something, but definitely don't keep it too tight, but set yourself your own mini deadlines, counting backwards from your last day, from your final day of the exam. And so those deadlines could include, like, the things I've just said, completing all the past papers, having done, say, biology in the sciences, having done physics, having revised for kind of chemistry. I want to, by the 23rd of May, have finished revising for both biology and physics within the sciences, for example, and you go, and then you kind of gradually come to the present day or week, then that will tell you, okay, I want to have done already 2 or 3 past papers. I want to have done 20% of the different topics, or like chapter up to chapter 5 of history or something like that, right? So then you know step by step how long it will take for you to get to each stage, and whether you have completed what you said you would by those days. And you also have the peace of mind that if you basically follow that timeline, you know 100% that you will have done everything by the time you have the exam, with a few hours of a day or two, maybe not a few hours, but a day or two to spare. Okay. And I would suggest to think of it roughly in terms of 3 rounds of revision. So I called it 3 rounds of revision: consolidation, drilling, and refinement. And I will kind of go into the specifics of what they involve and, you know, what you can do in each stage. But roughly, consolidation is going through everything, make sure that you actually have understood and read through everything that you need to know. You've covered all the topics. If something was a little bit unsure, a little bit rough, now consolidation is the stage where you go back to them and be like, oh, that's bit I didn't understand in the exam, or that was the chapter that where like I left out, or that I found really hard, and now you kind of go back and cover your grounds. And whereas drilling is practice, really remembering your quotes, really practicing the same type of questions again and again, kind of going back to past papers to see whether there were, kind of questions on the same topic, using study clicks or whatever. So that's drilling, really getting the idea and the concepts memorized in your head. And last but not least, refinement. So that is when you say, I want that distinction, I want that H1, I want that 100%, right? That's when you really go into the nitty-gritty and be like, let's go back to the book. I've done all my past papers, I'm getting about over 90%, but just so I am sure that I have not left anything out, or just, is there anything else I can know about this play, or anything else any other techniques that I can revise for, I don't know, unseen poetry, or anything like that, or like maybe additional vocab or additional information that I can kind of, look back on and revise to add to what I already know in your foreign language, for example. So that's your refinement stage. So now, after you've marked yourself the deadlines, thought in terms of the 3 rounds of revision that you're going to do, and have your calendar countdown ready, feel free to, if you're doing this and you're not done, feel free to pause the video. So now I'm going to move on to talking about the practical things that you can do, like in each stage and just in general when you're doing your exam revision. I'm recording this before the Easter holidays, so if you're watching it right now, as the video kind of comes out, I would recommend before or right at the start of your holidays, do 1 or 2, not the most recent, but relatively recent mock papers, so your past papers, per subject for yourself, timed in exam condition. So with your pen and paper ready, any calculator, anything you need, just sit down and do them, right? Yes, there are things that you don't know. Yes, there are things that you haven't revised, but this is the whole point, right? And just so that your brain registers, okay, we're starting to do this now. This is the whole course that we're covering. These are the things that I thought I remembered, but actually I don't. So this, number 1, gives your mind the kind of the concept that, okay, now we're serious about the whole revision process. We've started. And number 2, it gives you a real sense of what you know and what you don't know, because if you just go into the books and revise, maybe we feel overly confident, or maybe we feel overly worried, right? So actually just sit down and kind of give yourself that space will kind of make sure that you kind of set off with a very realistic sense of where you are. Doesn't matter if you get 40%, doesn't matter if you get 80, it's just for yourself, okay? And so after that, depending on your preference, once you have realized whether it's through these papers or through going through the topics at the start of your book, or going through your previous exams in school, you have an idea of which areas you're kind of maybe less comfortable with and which areas maybe you are slightly more familiar with. And now, and as well as which subjects you're better at, etc., etc. So depending on your preference, I'm going to give you two options. So number one, if you know there are some very kind of obvious gaps in your knowledge, so whether it's the Industrial Revolution or whether it is going on the holidays, like the vocab in that kind of chapter in your Spanish, anything like that, if you know that there are clear gaps that are making you feel like that I am not comfortable with, if that comes up, or like I just and that bit of the paper I'm not going to I'm not comfortable, if you feel wobbly like that, I would recommend you to go through with option one, which is you literally tackle the pain points first. They might be the most painful, they might be the things you don't like, right? So you're not you're not kind of good at them for a reason, right? Maybe because it doesn't interest you, or maybe you find it boring, anything like that. But I would recommend, if you have those gaps, really just say, I'm going to deal with them first, right? Set specific chunks of time in your calendar, or maybe in a separate calendar that's more specific with more space for this week. That first week of Easter, deal with these horrible chunks, right? Don't call them horrible chunks, call them like kind of emergency topics or something like that. Deal with these, no matter what subjects they are, deal with them first, okay? And then you can go with the kind of continue with the different revision processes later. Option two, if you are someone who has been kind of quite diligent, or who has kind of overall kind of very even in terms of where you lose marks, there's no significant gaps, or maybe you don't know where those gaps are and you don't have strong preferences, likes or dislikes, everything maybe is just about fine, but you're a bit worried, what I would recommend you do is to go with option two, which is you basically say, okay, I'm gonna pair off something that I'm kind of quite good at with a topic that maybe I'm slightly less good at, or maybe I'm like I don't like as much, or I have not done as many questions in. Pair these off, like literally go, okay, chapter 2 goes with chapter 10 and chapter 3 goes with chapter 5, anything like that. Just like write it down on the list, and then you complete, and once you have these pairs, you complete 1 or 2 of these combos per day per subject. Okay, so if I say, so in maths, you've got maybe, I don't know, geometry, and then you have, I really can't think of a specific thing, functions, maybe. Then you say, okay, I don't like functions, but like geometry, I'm okay with, but I like to brush it up. You pair these off, and you say, okay, on that day I'm doing these 2 topics in that, and then similarly those similar pair of topics in English, for example. So you deal with 1 or 2 such combos per day per subject, so that you still have a plan, and your brain is still receiving something that it's kind of quite interested and quite confident about, and as well as something that it's less familiar with, so that you both consolidate your strengths and don't lose out on marks because you neglected them. That happens more than you think. And also kind of cover off the less favorable topics, such that you don't actually skip them or end up having to deal with the things you don't like all the time. Okay, so it's like being fair to your mind that's currently working very hard. Okay, so now I've already talked a little bit about the 3 stages of revision, as I like to call them: consolidation, drilling, and refinement. So in terms of specifically the things you can do in these stages, I'm just going to now kind of give you go into details on those activities. They're not going to be like exhaustive, but hopefully there are some things in there that you're not kind of currently implementing and you can try out. In the consolidation stage, obviously you're probably doing this or you've done this already. So review the chapters, make your notes. I know some of you make, wonderful, lovely notes, right? So that's your first stage. And then once you do that, if you haven't, definitely is the first way to go, is to clear out the definitions, know in your head what is involved and what is covered in each topic. But don't spend time on making it overly beautiful. It's only for yourself, right? You're not decorating them for sale. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, if there's anything that's unclear, or you feel like the way that the textbook has kind of described it or your teacher has taught it to you is a little bit hard to grasp, try watching different videos, even ask ChatGPT to explain it in a different way, right? Sometimes it's not to do with whether you're good at naturally you're good at, or you're smart so that you can understand, say, I don't know, coordinate geometry, right? Sometimes maybe it's just the way that it was taught to you, just it didn't vibe with you, right? It didn't resonate, and that's okay, right? That's why you have all the different teachers on YouTube or on different courses, or you can get ChatGPT to say, okay, I was taught this way, can you explain this problem in a different way? And just try it like that, and see, and don't kind of brush things off as as difficult, or as like, oh, I'm not good at this bit, right? It's not necessarily the case. Okay, so once you've done the consolidation, you've understood everything, and you know what's like involved in each topic. Now you have the drilling, right? So you've made your notes, that's all kind of done. You try to memorize whatever you could. Now drilling. Okay, so study clicks, and I'm sure there are maybe kind of other resources that you can do that breaks down the questions by topic, back of the book questions, especially the harder ones. And when you do kind of questions by topic, so don't spend time on things that you do know. If you see a question and you've done them, a few times, the same type of questions, or the same poem, or the same essay you have to write in history, anything like that, if you know you can do it in the drilling stage, just move on, right? Again, great that you can do it. Great that if you've done a mock paper and you've seen that come up, you can see, oh, I know how to write this. We love doing things we can do, right? But don't spend your precious time on it, right? You're still making your brain work. And if you know that it's already something that you have in the bag, it's almost like, if you have a tool that you know how to use, like, then don't waste your precious energy waving it around, right? It's like, you don't have to show other people that you can have, you know how to do it. Move on to the things that you're less comfortable with, and you will master them quicker, right? You'll get to the end quicker. Okay, so drilling, very self-explanatory. So I'll move on to refinement. So refinement is where you really want to make sure that you get that 95%. You want to get that 98%, anything like that, right? With refinements, after you've done the consolidation and drilling, you are probably getting like high 80s at the minimum, right? Then in your mocks, then in your refinements, look at your tiniest details in your textbook. Now is the time that you go back, you turn away temporarily from past papers and go back to your textbook. Go back to the poems, go back to the vocab, go back to the textbook, right? The diagrams, all the little tiniest commentaries, the little things included in any sort of boxes that were not actually significant, that was not part of your notes, that was not like the key definitions, the things that people might miss, right? Pretend that you're almost like a detective, right? Like I'm sure you've seen TV shows or anything like that, where you go in and this detective is able to spot what other people have thought that is like done and dusted, right? They can spot tiny details that will kind of, make a difference, make a huge difference to the case or to solving the crime or whatever. This is the same case, right? When you want to guarantee that you want to get that 100%, especially with top subjects, that's a little bit more, I would say, like, not memorization necessarily, but like that requires you to actually know like details or know facts, like whether it's history or religion, religious studies, or the sciences, especially, I remember. Don't take an easy topic for granted, and make sure you check, even if okay, in this plants reproductive system, I know that topic, I always get 100, but now you've moved on, right? In refinement, you go back, you look and you dig for the details that will solve a crime scene, right? You look for the tiniest details that maybe you have not noticed before, that maybe your friends have not noticed before. Those are the things that will perhaps make that difference by the end of the exam. And I know that because it happens in the sciences for me in junior cert, and in maths in leaving cert, where people, for example, would assume that biology maybe is easier than physics or chemistry in junior cert, and then they think they know it because they've done the past papers, but actually that year biology was surprisingly difficult, and people was hoping that they would get the marks in biology, but ended up not getting them, and then they would think that, but those questions never come up, right? I was never asked those details in past papers. Where were they in the book? Right? And then you go at the end of the exam and you open the book and you be like, yes, it was there, but because they're not summarized in the key definitions, they didn't come up very often in past papers. People forget that they exist. But you know what? It's fair game. If it was in the textbook, it's fair game that they come up, right? So you never really know how, just because you did 100 past papers does not mean that you know everything that's going to come up in the exam, right? So if you want that refinement, if you want that extra kind of assurance of the mind, if you know that you've been getting really good grades in English or in French or whatever, but you want to make sure that you're great across the board and you're fully covered, this is what you do. Okay, you go back to the textbook. Don't spend too much time on past papers thinking that will cover you. Okay, so now just briefly on alternative methods of studying. You do not have to sit. You do not have to sit and write in order for you to be revising. Okay, especially if you're someone who is a little bit more, maybe in terms of your learning style, a bit more oral, a little bit more kind of, or if you're just really active, or you're a little bit more fidgety, or if you feel like, oh, I get distracted a lot, anything like that, right? You need to spice up, right? You need to spice up your revision game, and you need to make it more kind of interesting for your mind, because it's working hard, right? Don't just say, okay, now I have to sit down for 8 hours and work really hard and, and make myself so tired and stiff. You don't have to do that. Okay. For example, you can, if it's an essay in history, and you have to memorize a lot of facts, write off the essay, record yourself, listen to it, right? If you're more of an oral learning style. If you don't know what your learning style is, just ask yourself a simple question. If it's the same piece of information, do I learn it better by looking at it, right? Reading about it, or hearing someone say it to me? Or is it something like I have to kind of maybe do myself and try it out? And then you kind of decide that way. But for sometimes we kind of forget that actually we could learn in the oral way more often when we're on our own, right? In school, people teach it to you, your teachers speak, and then they use PowerPoints to some, to different degrees, and you have that combination of listening and watching and reading. But at home, we often just end up writing notes, doing questions, checking our mistakes, do them again, right? We lose out on the speaking element. So record yourself, teach yourself, talk out loud, stand up, walk around, explain concepts to yourself. If you have things on like flashcards, go to the park, read them as you kind of walk around, just stand still, have a read, have a think, keep walking, right? You do not have to stay in your study. You do not have to stay at your desk for you to be learning effectively. And sometimes if you have had to do that a lot for your mocks, for your, as in like for your own mocks, right, for your past papers or something like that, you just need a change of scene. Or the weather is so beautiful that you are just like getting annoyed that you're not out there, but you need to study, change it up, right? If your parents think that, you know, you're just messing around, you can show them the video that I did say so, but please do study when you're out. Don't just kind of end up being on your phone and talking to your friends. That defeats the whole point. But actually just try listening to yourself, recording yourself, talking to yourself, teaching someone else the same topic. If your friend doesn't understand it, try to kind of record yourself in messages explaining a concept. If you can explain it, you know it. Okay, so now last but not least, in terms of what you can do each day, when you say, okay, Easter Monday, holiday, I know I have to do some mock papers or I have to do this and that. How do I structure my day so that I don't get exhausted or I don't start panicking or I don't get tired and not get things done? Okay. Number one, have a to-do list based partly on your long-term planning thing that we did earlier in this video. Make a daily to-do list just for that day. Seeing that how much you need to get done by the end of the week, right? You should have that in your long-term calendar already. Based on that, have a to-do list for that day planned out the day before. Okay, the night before, when you log off, when you're done, set out a few things that you know you would like to complete by tomorrow, and write down an approximate time for yourself. It's not like you have to spend 2 hours revising you know, kind of the Industrial Revolution, but it's approximately you think how much it will take you, just so that you don't over plan, right? Have a realistic sense. You know, don't kind of over exaggerate, but also don't under plan and think that you are just going to be super efficient and super focused and it's only going to take me half an hour, when in reality it probably takes you an hour, right? Just be fair. And set an approximate time, and then so that you don't over plan, and then prioritize, right? Look at the list you set out and circle or put a star between for the 3 major tasks that you need to do that day. So if for some reason you know, you can't do everything on that list, if there were 3 things you would really love to get done by the end of tomorrow, right, when you're doing this list, so that you would really like to have kind of completed by the end of the day, and you feel like, if I do these 3 things, I can feel comfortable and happy about the day of work that I've done, start those. Okay, and then when the day comes, in that morning, when you see those stars, you start with those, because you know that the day before wanted those things done, and you know that you will get the peace of mind if you do those three things, and have those things done. They're usually the things that's probably more painful, but also gives you a better, like a greater sense of fulfillment when you've done them. So do those 3 things. Of course, mix and match, but knowing that those 3 things are the things I need to get done. And the rest, sometimes we end up having days that we feel super productive and we say we want to do everything, right? And more. And we're just really in the flow, super focused. Excellent. There are other days where maybe you know, have a little bit of a headache, or you just feel really tired, you didn't sleep well, or something happens and something urgent happened, you had to be out or something, and you don't get everything else on the to-do list done, and that's okay, right? You don't end up feeling defeated because your to-do list had the 3 stars and you cross up those 3 stars and you still had a good day. Okay, so it's like, that's the other thing to do with planning, is that we don't end up making ourselves feel more stressed out and deflated because we don't hit our goals again and again, right? It happens, but we need, you know, some days are like that, right? Some days we don't complete everything we set out to do, but this way, by having a priority, having the stars, you help yourself kind of stay on track in the long run. Okay, point number 2, every day. I know some of you like to say, oh, you know, this week I am just doing, you know, English and French, or this week I am just doing so much maths, everyday math. Today is a maths day, tomorrow is a geography day, something like that. I would recommend for your brain, unless you're someone who really loves to just focus on one thing, and your brain, you know for a fact that your brain actually likes doing that and you find it difficult to switch tasks. If you're not actually naturally like that, I would highly recommend having a combination of 2 to 3 subjects a day. Okay, so on your to-do list, you should have at least 2 to 3 subjects. Maybe no more than 5 subjects, because then you're spreading yourself too thin. So do not do one subject a day in most cases, right? Don't think, oh, today is going to be a big day of maths, and therefore I'm going to be like super productive and super in the maths mode. It's not really how your brain usually works. Okay, number 3 is, to reiterate, have a combination of studying techniques on your to-do list. Rather than saying today I'm making notes in sciences, I'm making notes in history, I'm making notes in geography, do not do the same type of learning across subjects in one day, right? Just give yourself more variety. It's not like you would eat the same food over and over again, like, every day, and think that that's what's going to make you happy in most cases, right? So you would want a little bit of variety, and your brain wants that too. Treat it, and the way, like, I keep saying that your brain rather than you, is that because when you're revising and doing so much hard work, it's helpful to think of helping your brain and giving your brain kind of the chance to do different things and switch between tasks when you're demanding so much of it, when you're demanding that it learn, when you're demanding that it don't do it, not do other things, right? Give it a bit of variety and say, okay, if I'm making notes in the sciences, maybe in English I try to kind of do some past papers and write a few essays, and maybe in French I learn off some vocab while I go out for a walk, something like that, right? So that you have a variety planned out for that day. And last but not least, because it's actually super important, is that you have one contrasting activity, ideally a day, if not 3 to 4 times a day. What do I mean by a contrasting activity? A bit of exercise, put on a short YouTube video, do a little stretch, even go out for a little run, a little brisk walk. If you have a hobby, it's just having fun with that hobby, whatever that means. And coffee, having an ice cream, anything like that. Have these little activities in your calendar, maybe in a different color, so that your brain's like knowing that there are little stops, little break points. Like if you're running a marathon, right, you have little refreshment points that it can hit, and it can kind of reset a little bit, because your mind also needs to breathe, it needs to relax, and sometimes sleep is not the best way, right? You need the sleep, but sometimes sleep is not the only way or the optimal way for your brain to just have a little bit of something different to play with and to go on. So hopefully, if you are sitting a lot in the day, your contrasting activity is not like still, it's not sedentary, right? Any sort of activity, any sort of, maybe bake yourself a cake or something like that, anything like that is contrasting to what you've been doing that day. Okay, so hopefully that was useful for all of you who are preparing for your exams, and I hope if you have any questions, leave it in the group chat and I will try to address them. Otherwise, I wish all of you the best of luck in your exams, and have fun revising.